Hey everybody, it's Craig back to here, and in this video we're going to do a review of the BlackMagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro. We're going to talk about the design, the build quality, we're going to look at some footage shot in 6K. We're also going to talk about the ergonomics of the camera, the LCD screen, the improvements I think they've made from the original 6K version. So let's get right into it. If you're familiar with the BlackMagic range of cameras, they came out with the BlackMagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K in 2018, and that was back ordered forever. And a lot of people really liked that camera, but there was a few drawbacks that they didn't like. We'll get into that in this video. Then in 2019, they came out with the 6K. Now, it looked very similar to the 4K, but it had an EF mount. So the 4K had a micro four thirds sensor with a micro four thirds lens mount. The 6K had a Canon EF lens mount and a Super 35 sensor. So fast forward, and now we have the 6K Pro version. Essentially, it's the same sensor as the 6K version, but there's some improvement, and it makes this camera a whole lot more usable. And so let's cover that. Now, you can see, as far as the build of this camera, it does feel quite solid, and it feels good in your hand. And if you compare it to some of the lenses, so for example, the Sigma 18-35, very popular lens with the BlackMagic Pocket Cinema Camera range. Also, I have a Carl Zeiss ZE, so this is a Canon EF, and it's a 35mm f1.4. This weighs about 2 pounds. So combined with this heavy lens, or a Sigma lens, with the body, it feels really well balanced, surprisingly. I mean, it is a lot larger than, say, a Sony a7S III, but you know, as far as the cinema camera goes, it's a lot smaller than an Arri Alexa Mini, which is a small cinema camera if you look at it that way. Some of the noticeable improvements is the screen. Now, this is a 5-inch adjustable screen, where in the previous models of the 4K and the 6K, the screen wasn't adjustable. But one of the best things about this is it's now 1500 nit brightness. Now, that's incredibly bright. The previous screen was about 400 nits, and you couldn't see it very well in daylight, so you would need an external monitor, which would add more to the price of rigging this camera out so you could use it. So I think the improvement with the adjustability of this screen plus the 1500 nits, it's awesome. You can really see this, and it's helpful for when you're focusing, because although this has touch autofocus, it's really a manual focus camera, in my opinion. And so you want to be able to see the peaking lines, that you're sharp focus, and this really helps you in daylight. Also, it helps you determine if you've got the image set up properly, your exposure, everything. So it's a real game changer. Now, also, too, another thing about this was the original 4K and 6K didn't have the best battery life. So this new one here uses this Sony NPF 570 style battery, and this is actually a higher capacity. This is 3500 mAh. So you can get the BlackMagic version, and it's very affordable too. It's not crazy priced. They're very affordable, so you could have a pocket full of these. Because I do like to run this on a gimbal. Now, that's one thing too that we should talk about, is there's no image stabilization in the camera. Now, you can get Canon EF mount lenses with image stabilization built into the lens, but the camera body itself does not have that. So if you're using just manual lenses like the Carl Zeiss or the Sigma 18-35, that doesn't have image stabilization as well, so you'll need a camera gimbal. Now, I've used this camera with the DJI RS-C2, which is a smaller version. I would also recommend, though, maybe getting the RS2, because it is a heavier camera, and if you want to put a cage and maybe some heavy lenses, you're kind of reaching the max capacity of the RS-C2. So definitely look into the DJI RS2 if you're looking for a gimbal to go with this camera. Now, we've talked about how it lacks image stabilization. It lacks a continuous autofocus, but we'll get to more of those things at the end of this video. But really, when it comes to a cinema camera, a lot of people don't consider that to be a factor, because most cinema cameras don't have continuous autofocus or image stabilization. So not necessarily a concern to some users who are looking for a cinema camera. Now, we've talked about the battery. So there's improved battery life with the Sony NPF 570 battery. One battery will last you about an hour. So you can pick up a couple of those, and that'll give you about 2 to 3 hours of battery life. Now, also, there's a new battery grip. It's an improved battery grip over the battery grip used for the 4K and the 6K. This new battery grip allows you to use 2 batteries, and it attaches to the bottom. So that will give you 3 batteries. I didn't get the grip myself. I may get one down the line, but I just bought 3 of these batteries to start with, because I like to keep this rig as minimal as possible for using on a gimbal. So like I said, you'll need a gimbal for this for stable footage. Some people can get away with handheld. Maybe I drink too much coffee. I don't know. I can't seem to hold this steady. But also a tripod obviously would also be beneficial to get stable shots. Now let's talk about a few other things. I think the menu on this camera is super simple to use. It's very intuitive. It's probably, I'd say, 10 times better than any menu I've used. I've owned Canon cameras, Nikon cameras, Panasonic cameras. I'm currently shooting on the Sony a7S III, and this menu is far simpler than any of those cameras. And it has some great features too. It comes with false color built in. It has zebras, and those help you really get an accurate exposure. Also, it has a new RGB histogram, which is also helpful too. Now, some of the early models when this first launched suffered from a blue tint issue on the LCD screen. Since then, BlackMagic has released version 7.3 and 7.31 updates for this camera, and now you can calibrate the LCD screen, so that's not an issue. So if you heard about that and you're on the fence about it, the new software compensates, let's say, if your LCD screen isn't totally white balanced, in your opinion. There is no camera LCD screen that has a perfect white balance. They're all going to be slightly different, and they may not be calibrated to what your reference monitor might be anyway. But it is nice to be able to have that feature where you can adjust the white balance just to make this look a little more like what your eye is seeing. Although you shouldn't really rely on that. But one bonus of this camera is that you can shoot in BlackMagic Raw. Now, if you don't know what that means, is basically you shoot in BlackMagic Raw, 12-bit internally. Now you can shoot to an SD card or a CF Fast 2.0 card, or you can also shoot externally through the USB-C port to like a Samsung T5. You could have a 500 gigabyte, a 1 terabyte, and you could shoot to external media. Now what's so great about that is you can adjust your ISO, your exposure, and your tint all in the RAW file, and it gives you a lot of flexibility in post. So even if you don't nail your white balance, it's not as important if, say, you were shooting with other cameras. So if you're shooting with the Sony, you'd really want to nail that white balance in camera, whereas when you're shooting to BlackMagic Raw, if you off a little bit, it's not a big issue. And there's a lot of different built-in white balance choices that you have. And also, you can easily white balance with a gray or white card. There's a button right on the top for white balance. I'm going to do another video about how to white balance your BlackMagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro. So if you're not already a subscriber, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you don't miss that video. Also, if you're finding this video helpful, hit that thumbs up button. Give me a like. It really helps this video get more views. But let's go on about this camera. So a lot of things that I like about this is there's 3 function buttons on the top. And so what I have this program for is I have it programmed for false color, for zebras, and for my peaking. So this helps me as far as getting exposure, and then I can turn it off. It helps me to know if I'm blown out with the zebras at about 95%. And also with the focus peaking, I can get sharp focus, I can get that confirmed, and then I can turn that off, and then I can just shoot. And it makes it really super simple. Also, there's a zoom in button on the back of the camera, so you can zoom in, and you can also pinch to zoom as well. So you could really zoom in on a subject and really get that focus sharp. Also too, the playback on this is great. You can play back the footage and scrub through the footage easily. There's also a fast way to get a faster shutter speed. So you can pre-program this with the menu on the back. So you could be shooting in 24 frames per second. You can set it for 50 or 60. You hit the button and boom, it's that easy. You're now shooting in slow motion. Also too, another improvement with this camera is the Builtin ND Filters. So you have a built-in 2-stop, 4-stop, and 6-stop. And that's a game changer if you have a lot of different lenses, and let's say you have an ND filter for this one and that one and this one, and it can get very expensive if you have a lot of different size lenses and different size ND filters, and it can be kind of a hassle. So with the built-in NDs, that's great. Some people may say, well, it's only 6-stop. If you do have any other NDs, you can add an additional 2-stop or 6-stop if you really want to, and then you can shoot at f1.4, say on a lens like the Zeiss. And some people have said, oh, well, there's a bit of a tint shift. There's going to be a tint shift when you go from not having an ND to an ND, regardless if it's an external ND or an internal ND. So what BlackMagic is trying to do is create an IR ND filter that favors skin tones. So some people will say, well, there's still some infrared contamination with the built-in filters. And that might be true to a certain extent, but they've done it to give the emphasis on having great skin tones. Because if sometimes you go overboard with the infrared filters, it can affect the skin tones. So I think they've met a good compromise in regards to the IR ND filters that are built into the camera. But overall, at this price point, I mean, you can't find a camera that shoots 6K RAW with built-in ND filters with a 1500 nit screen. Like, think about that. Even the Ninja, the Adamas Ninja 5, is 1000 nit brightness. So here you get a built-in 5-inch screen, 1500 nits of brightness built in, and it's adjustable. So you don't need an external monitor if you're going to be shooting outdoors, it's just awesome. And like I said, you've got the built-in NDs. It has dual ISO. So the base ISO is 400 ISO, and then 3200 ISO, which means that as you go up from 400, say 800, 1000, 1500, it's going to get noisier. But when you hit 3200, it becomes cleaner again, more like you're shooting at 400. So if you get to the point where you're close to 3200, make sure you go up to 3200 ISO so that you have a cleaner image. I also want to talk about the dynamic range. So this is rated at 13 stops of dynamic range. Now I've compared this to the Sony a7S III, which is stated to be 15 stops of dynamic range, and I would say the two of them are very comparable. It's a very usable 13 stops of dynamic range, and I find that shooting on a bright day, I can keep all the highlights and all the darks and not blow out the image and really get a solid image for editing in BlackMagic Raw. So the 13 stops, pretty happy with that as well. And like I already talked about, the BlackMagic Raw codec is really great as far as dealing with that in DaVinci Resolve. It plays smoothly, it's easy to make adjustments, and you get a great quality picture, great color. You can also, this will be in a different video, but you can also take the Gen 5 image, the color science. When you're shooting in RAW, you can convert that to ARRI, Alexa RAW basically, and you can adjust and play with that with some LUTs for the ARRI Alexa if you like the ARRI Alexa colors. But they're both very comparable. The image that you get from the BlackMagic Raw versus the ARRI Alexa, very similar colors in my opinion, very good quality for the price point with this camera. There's a couple optional accessories I just want to touch on. One is the battery grip. It's different than the battery grip for the 4K and the 6K. It uses the Sony NPF 570 style batteries, and you can put 2 batteries in the battery grip, one in the camera grip giving you 3 batteries, and it's a very affordable price point at about $2 for that battery grip. You can also get an optional EVF, so an electronic viewfinder. I'm not going to get it myself, but some people really do enjoy using one. I think the screen on the back is fine for me, but that's an option that you have available as well. Now, as far as the weather sealing, I wouldn't say that it's very weather sealed, so I wouldn't take this out in the rain without some kind of rain cover. You can see here, there's some vents. If you look here, there's vents at the top. There's also some vents at the bottom. I've got a tripod plate on here, but there's a lot of open vents. So as far as shooting outdoors, if it's misty, rainy, foggy, I would definitely get a plastic cover for the camera. But as far as the ergonomics, as far as where the buttons are placed, I think they're placed in a really easy to use format, especially with the ND filters. You could see where your thumb would be with that grip. You could really hold this camera, although it's quite heavy with the 2-pound lens, and the camera itself is just under 3 pounds. So you're looking at about 5 pounds, but the way the grip is designed, it's really quite easy to hold with one hand. And then especially if you just sort of balance it with your left hand, it's well balanced with a heavier lens for sure. And like I said, the ND buttons there on the back, really easy to just adjust with your thumb, as well as all the other controls. And then the touchscreen is very responsive, and it's just simple to set up and use. And then you have your function buttons that I mentioned earlier. And all in all, it's a great camera at this price point. If you're on the fence about the 6K or the 6K Pro, because it is the same sensor, so the image quality is going to be pretty much the same. Now, if you're on the fence and you're thinking, well, should I get the 6K? It's cheaper. I would say make sure you get the 6K Pro, because it's adjustable. That's worth $500 in my opinion. You've got the built-in NDs. That's probably worth $500. And then you've got the better battery life. That's going to save you some headaches. So those three things alone really go with the 6K Pro in my opinion. Now you may be thinking, well, what about other cameras? This doesn't have autofocus. It doesn't have image stabilization. So if those are a concern for you, if you really need image stabilization in camera, if you really need autofocus, continuous autofocus, because this is just one touch to focus, then I would say choose a different camera, because this isn't really like a run and gun YouTuber camera. The screen's adjustable, but it doesn't flip towards you. So if you're a vlogger and you like to hold your camera in front of you and talk to yourself and have it focus, then this really isn't the camera for you. But it does things that, say, the Sony a7S III, which I also own, doesn't do. Now it has shutter angle. It does 6K. I mean, it's got different modes for shooting. It shoots ProRes HQ internally. It shoots BlackMagic Raw. There's different formats that I can shoot in. I'll put a link below this video so you can find out more about all the different shooting formats, but it really has a wide range. Now also, the whole BlackMagic Cinema line now, the 4K, the 6K, and the 6K Pro, all have Gen 5 color science, which is a flatter color profile when you're shooting in RAW, so it helps when it comes to editing. Now also too, with all BlackMagic cameras, you get a license to DaVinci Resolve Studio. So right now at the time of this video, it's DaVinci Resolve 17 Studio version, which I think costs roughly about $400. That's really quite a good deal, because if you haven't used DaVinci Resolve or you're on the fence, I was using Adobe Premiere for probably 7 years, and I was afraid to switch to BlackMagic DaVinci Resolve, but it goes so smoothly. It's a lot like Apple. They make the hardware and they make the software. So if you do have a BlackMagic camera or you're thinking about it, definitely learn how to use DaVinci Resolve. It's not that hard. What I did was I just canceled my subscription to Adobe Premiere, so I really had no choice, because when I had it there, I would always just fall back on that because I know how to do it. And then same thing if you're using Final Cut. It's easy to just go with what you know. But really, it wasn't that hard once I started to put the files in, play around with it, watch a few videos on YouTube, and I'm able to do a complete video now, do voiceovers, do all kinds of things, and it's really a great piece of software. That's a whole other video. I'll cover how to edit in DaVinci Resolve. So like I said, if you're not already a subscriber, just hit that subscribe button and hit that bell notification, and when the video comes out about how to edit the 6K Pro footage in DaVinci Resolve, then you'll get an email. So go ahead and do that right now if you're not already a subscriber. Again, too, if you found this video helpful, give me a like, give me a thumbs up. It'll help this video get more views. Now, if you have any comments or questions or things that I didn't cover in this video, you can put them in the comments section below. Just leave me a comment and I'll address that in future videos. So all in all, just to sum up, at this price point, I would choose the 6K Pro over the 6K or the 4K because it shoots in 6K. That's great. It's got the EF lens mount. And one thing I want to mention too about the EF lens mount is some people may say, well, it should have had the RF mount, the newer Canon lenses. But if you think about it, with everyone switching from Canon to Sony or from the EF to the new RF lenses, a lot of people are trying to sell their EF lenses. So I've been able to get EF lenses, used ones, in great condition at half the retail price, which is amazing. I mean, this lens here, it's a Carl Zeiss 35mm f1.4. When this retailed, it was like something crazy, like $1,800. I was able to get this lens used on sites like, say, Craigslist or Kijiji in Canada. I was able to get this lens for a trade of a Canon Speedlight that I had for years. Maybe it was worth $200 if I was lucky, and $400 cash. So for like $600, I was able to grab this lens used, and it's in perfect shape. So that's another plus, I think, with using the EF mount on this. So not only do you have the Super 35 sensor, which in my opinion is better than the Micro Four Thirds sensor, but you can get cheap EF lenses because everyone's selling theirs right now. So that's a plus in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, I'm pretty happy with this. I mean, at first I was like, wow, this is huge. And compared to the Sony a7S III, it's like twice the size and the sensor's smaller. So you'd think, well, geez, what's going on? Why is this so big? But it does have the built-in ND, so that's part of it. And there's different things that this camera can do that the Sony can't. I mean, 6K footage, 1500 nit screen, 5-inch screen, adjustable. Wow, it's it's a whole different beast in comparison to the Sony. So like I said, if you're a YouTuber and a vlogger and you need to see yourself, you need a screen that flips out, and you need autofocus, then, you know, Sony's probably your better bet, or Canon for that matter. If you consider yourself more of a cinematographer and you really want to explore the different recording modes that you can do with this, and good quality raw footage at 6K is important to you, then definitely I don't think there's a better camera at this price point than the BlackMagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K at the time of this recording. So like I said, if you have any questions about this camera, you want to see some tutorials about this camera, or if you want some tutorials on how to edit in BlackMagic DaVinci Resolve, then post a comment down below of what you'd like to see, and I'll make sure that I have those videos coming out soon in the next couple of weeks, and I'll try to address all of the questions you may have. Anyway, it's Craig back to here. Thanks for watching. This is the BlackMagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro review. If you found it helpful, give me a thumbs up. And also, if you want to see more videos about this camera and some tutorials about DaVinci Resolve, make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit that bell notification so you get updates when the next video goes live. All right, thanks again for watching. I really want to hear from you, so post a comment down below with any questions you may have about this camera or DaVinci Resolve. All right, thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next video.